Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bun Bun. This is our reaction and review for Under the Bridge Season 1, Episode 3. Who is the real Rebecca Godfrey? Also, who really likes dinner for breakfast? Because I don't know if I'm going out on a limb here. This is an atrocity. The thing that you need to have is breakfast for dinner. You need to get your Brenner on because that is where it's at. You get some pancakes, you get some sausage links.
Okay, you're trying to tell me that you've never had dinner for breakfast. You've never gone to the fridge and been like, cold pizza, let's go. Leftovers from last night, let's go.
Only if it is the only thing I have.
Oh,
If I
come
have
on.
nothing else in the house, I will do this. Otherwise, no. I'm sorry.
No, if I have a choice to have cold pizza, I would rather have that than eggs. Everyday eggs, no.
No. Okay. Well,
And I'm a breakfast person. Like, I never go out to dinner, but I will go out for breakfast.
what a great way to start a discussion about a dark murder mystery show than a minute-long rant about what you should be eating for breakfast.
Listen, you have to have a little bit of lightness when you're talking about such serious subjects as Under the Bridge. I mean, this is a pretty dark show. It's based on a true story. I mean, there's a lot of darkness going on in this show.
It's still really, really great.
Yeah, it is.
I feel like, and who knows, maybe it's just me living in my own little bubble, but I already feel like this is going to be a contender for most underrated show of the year. It feels like probably not getting as much attention as it should.
I hope that it starts to get more and more attention. I mean, at least they didn't drop it all at once, so there is time
Yeah.
for people to be able to find it and get into this show because everybody should be watching the show. So far, it's excellent.
If you guys are loving this discussion so far, be sure to join our Patreon. We got a link in the description below there. We're going to have live streams talking all about Under the Bridge every week. We don't want you to miss those. And thank you, of course, to those of you who have already joined. We appreciate it so much.
Okay, let's get into the question that you asked.
Yeah.
Who is the real Rebecca Godfrey? Because we're watching her on the show as this writer that has gotten involved in this case, and she is now writing her book around what is going on about the girls from Seven Oaks, their involvement, and what happened to Reena.
Okay. I will start this by saying, and we mentioned this in the discussion for the premiere, and we have that linked in the description, but I have not read the source material. I'm not that familiar with the true story. However, over the past week, I at least did a little bit more research on Rebecca herself, and the more I've sort of found out, the more that the way that the show is telling this story is very interesting, because for those of you who saw the movie Capote, that was sort of about Truman Capote and In Cold Blood, they made him a character in that movie, whereas in the book In Cold Blood, it's really not the case. And I kind of feel like in some ways there's a similarity here going on where Rebecca Godfrey on the show is being made into a character, an active part of the story, when in reality this is a woman who went to Victoria originally to write this fictionalized story, but then as she ends up becoming more and more immersed in this world, there starts to be this nonfiction idea that sort of spawns from all of that. I think it's a really interesting decision that they've made to sort of incorporate her directly as a character within her own story. I think it really works. I don't know if that's polarizing to other people out there who feel like it's a little bit too much of like the storyteller invading the story, but I really enjoy it. I think it's really smart.
I will say that for the first couple episodes, I wasn't completely sold on it, but the more that I've been getting into it, especially this episode and her relationship with Cam and whatever their relationship was in the past, them getting together now feels like they were together in the past as well. I said that in the premiere. It felt like there was some chemistry there. You know, we had Rebecca like touch her shoulder and her be like, don't, like, we're not going back down that road again, but I guess they have. That it's grown on me in a way that I really, really like. I've seen so many shows and movies and stuff where it's like, there's, you know, this big crime thing going on, and now we're going to throw in a writer like Castle, where it's like, okay, you know, it works, but it's been done a lot. But here, because it's based on a true story and Rebecca did have her hands in this, it feels very different and it feels fresh.
Yeah, and it feels like she is a valuable component in trying to put together
Yes.
a lot of the different pieces. A lot of this is largely because she's been able to present herself to the likes of Josephine and these other young girls as, okay, you know, I can relate to you guys. I've had my own fair share of struggles. You're going to want to talk to me in a way that maybe you won't talk to other people. And she's sort of like this bizarro double agent in a way. Like, it's not like she has full and complete trust in terms of law enforcement doing the right thing, but she also does want answers, and she also does want to help in some capacity. So she's just kind of like in this interesting sort of push and pull scenario where she does have empathy for a lot of these people. But at the same time, you know, she knows there's this larger job that has to be done.
Yeah, and I mean, her relationship with Josephine's very interesting because it seems like she sees a lot of herself in Josephine from the past. And, you know, here's Josephine really trying to like latch on to something that, you know, carve something out just for her. All roads lead to New York City for her.
Yep.
She just wants to get there. She wants to get out of Seven Oaks. She wants to be in New York City, and she is willing to say and do anything for Rebecca, for this book, to get out and to get to New York City. And finally they get to this, you know, head to head where Rebecca has to say, listen, I know that you're lying. You didn't actually kill Reena, and I'm not taking you to New York City. This book has to be based on facts, and you're not being truthful with me.
Yeah, that's the thing about, I think, Rebecca. She can see through nonsense in a lot of ways, but beyond just that, she has an incredible source to help her see through nonsense when it comes to everything that Cam was able to figure out. Like you pointed out in the last video, the time discrepancies when it comes to whether or not Josephine could have been at a certain place at a certain time. And she really explained all that even further in this episode in a way that really just kind of blew up a lot of the story that was told.
I love Cam. I love watching like a murder mystery type show, true crime or not, where you have a really smart detective that is diving into it. I mean, I know there always has to be a little bit of like, the detective is always a little bit behind on what is going on, but she's just so smart and she's so quick on things.
Okay, let's pull out the detective gear, the magnifying glasses. Let's get into the case. As I said in the premiere, I don't have a lot of knowledge about what actually happens here. I'm trying to be like Cam in this situation. So, okay, we know that the official cause of death for Reena is that she drowned. But she also had a lot of very, very serious injuries that she would have died from at some point anyway. Now, Josephine was there for the first attack, but then there's everything that comes after that, and there are still a lot of mysteries when it comes to who was there, who wasn't there, but this episode did give us a little bit of information that we can rely on.
Yeah, so what we can rely on is there was the first attack under the bridge, and then we saw Reena come out and she was stumbling, but she was walking. Then they have said, the coroner has been like, okay, listen, there was also a second attack, and she would have died from those injuries, but she drowned. She was put into the water, or it happened in the water. We don't know that part yet, but she would have died from that attack, that second attack. So who is it? And that's the big thing about this show, is that for a lot of these shows, it is who did it, who done it.
Yes.
And I think that they gave us who done it in this episode, which makes it really interesting to me. And it starts to feel a lot more like Ripley, which is another show that we just covered. It's over on Netflix. It is amazing, where they tell you pretty early on who's responsible for it, and the rest of the show is watching that cat and mouse back and forth between who did it and the detective trying to figure out who did it. And it feels to me at this point, with the reveal of the boots, that Kelly was absolutely involved in this. How else did she get her hands on those boots? Because Reena, was wearing those boots when we first saw her leave from that video. So whoever's involved in the second attack took those boots, and she has those boots. So she is involved in it in some way. Do I think that she killed Reena? I do, especially after watching Josephine and Kelly have sort of that blood oath, where we saw Josephine, cut her friend in a way that wasn't going to really hurt her. Kelly just took it and was like, whoosh. I was like, oh, whoa, okay, she just doesn't care. So the fact that she then had those boots, I was like, oh, wow, so she's involved. I also feel like Warren's involved. Watching Kelly and Warren whispering back and forth like that, he had clothes that had blood on them that he was washing at his girlfriend's house. Like, I know he copped to being like, listen, yeah, I kicked her one time. But we saw him get initiated by all those guys. You know, that type of beating is something that he's been involved with, that has happened to him, is easily something then that he would be maybe doing to Reena. It just feels like he's involved. The bloody clothes, the whispering with Kelly, the whole like, I'm a good guy. Like every time he's around adults, he's very polite and presents himself as more of like a, you can trust me kind of person. I'm just like, I just don't trust you.
Okay,
I think they're in on it together. And I think that this show is going to be about why they decided to take it that step further.
If that is the case, I would be all for it. I think it could be really, really fascinating. There's still a lot of time left to really dive into everything.
Yeah,
I'm not fully sold on that we even know who the person who delivered the final blow is yet.
Who do you think? Who do you think? Who do you guys think? Leave it in the comments. Who do you think?
I still feel like there's a chance that there is some sort of adult who is watching at the very end of this, who sort of comes in at the conclusion of all of it. And I'm not trying to be too unrealistic here, where it's like, okay, we have the first group of attackers, then we have the second group. And, it feels like, especially with everything you just lined out, Warren and Kelly are a part of this second group. And then if there is a third group, is that too insane that it's just like, oh, here's another person who's going to come in and be a part of all this? If that's the case, it's somebody who was watching or somebody who was aware of what was going on. I still can't shake the fact that we spent all this time with the record being expunged. It's brought up again in episode 3. I think there's still some stuff there that we don't know. But
so you think maybe the dad?
I think it could be the dad, but I also think it could be somebody who was aware of stuff that happened with Reena's dad and somebody who has some sort of grudge, because that's a good way to obviously hurt him, go after his child. I think there's just a chance that this goes really, really deep and somebody saw an opportunity to blame this on some really reckless and downright horrible, young kids. And speaking of these kids, a couple of observations here. Number one, Warren G, that is your nickname. Find a new nickname, because I know you're in Canada. Warren G. Harding, terrible president. Look it up. You don't want to be nicknamed after Warren G. I'm sure that's not what he was doing, but
I don't think so.
I'm just throwing that out there. Also, I mean, yeah, Kelly, if we're going to get into the motivations as to why she would do something like this. I mean, you lined it out already. I mean, young teenagers, when there's jealousy, when there's anger, you get really emotional. Your friends start to like build you up, make you think you're going to do anything. I think the motives for them to be very, very involved are 100% there. And I do think that they were involved. I think you're right in that. Like, they played a big part in this. Clearly, they're trying to cover this up. But I also think, regardless of whether or not they killed her or not, they have this, internalized panic now that they know that she's dead, because they're probably thinking back of it, oh, did we actually kill her? Like, were we the people that are responsible? Because in the midst of that, like, chaos, when you're so young and like that adrenaline is going, maybe you don't even really remember what it is exactly that you did or where you left her off.
I think Kelly knows that she killed her. I think the fact that she isn't really saying anything, we had Josephine going around being like, yeah, I did. I pushed her over the bridge. It was me. Write the book. Take me to New York. All that's come out to be, BS. It's not true. Yeah. But Kelly's been really quiet. But the minute that Josephine saw those boots, like, all the blood drained out of her body. Like, she knew that Kelly was involved. And Kelly was just like, yeah, I did it for you, like, it's you and me. We're together in this. We're part of this crew. And, if you could start it, I'll end it. It's us together till the end, sort of thing. And I think that her, Reena, being, put into the water, it feels like what they said is true, that she was beaten up and those injuries were going to kill her, but they probably panicked. Like if they're young, they're teenagers. So what are they going to do? Oh no, how are we going to deal with this? Oh, we'll put her in the water. They'll think that she drowned. They won't look into it further. We'll do all these other things to make it look like this, make it look like that, and it'll look like she drowned, and then they'll just see her in the water and be like, "Okay, case closed." And they just don't realize that that's not how it works.
There is a real recklessness around everything that happened here, because how she ended up in the water is one of two things. It's either exactly what you said, where it's just like they panicked, they were trying to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, hoping that some of it
feels
stuck.
Messy.
Yeah, it feels really, really messy, and the only other way to get around this is it's just that if you're trying to frame the teenagers, you do this. You decide this is a perfect way to dispose of the body.
Yep.
You know it'll probably be found. You know you can blame these other people for it and say they're reckless, but it's just sort of like, if this was something that was severely premeditated, like you would have had to spend a lot of time watching and knowing what was going on. And that's the biggest hole I have in my own theory at the moment, is just like that would take a lot of deliberateness. But you mentioned Kelly and how quiet she is.
Yes.
So here's my equation of this. Josephine is all talk and a little bit of action. Kelly is a little bit of talk and a lot of action.
She's so much action. I mean, having those boots, stop. She did it. She did it.
I think there's a good chance. I think really, no matter who's responsible at this point, the fact that you have, these young people who all know, to some extent what the stakes are, even if they don't fully understand the ramifications of their actions, but they're not going to be willing to talk all that much, especially, if you've been with some of these other kids who have struggled a lot in your lives. Like, you have that sort of like bond of, oh, it's us against the world. You can't penetrate that. Not even somebody like Rebecca, who has really tried to worm her way into this. Like, there's only so far you're going to be able to go.
Okay, let's talk about Cam's dad, who made me extremely angry in this episode. I'm a former funeral director, for those of you who don't know. So having people come and ID bodies and stuff like that, that is something that happens, and it happens often.
Yeah.
The idea that Cam's father is like, listen, we need to look into Reena's dad. He didn't come down. We told him to come down, and the mom comes down. That is suspicious. I'm just like, what? Listen, I know it's the 90s, but it's not suspicious. It's whoever can handle coming down to ID their own child, come on down. Like, this is a very difficult situation. If the father can't handle it, that doesn't make him a suspect. I was just like yelling at my TV. I was just like, stop it. This is so ridiculous. Grief hits everybody differently. And, it hit her father really hard, and the mother was able to go down and do that. It's not abnormal.
I am not a former funeral director, but I still felt the same exact thing when I was watching that, because I was sort of like, okay, do I have questions about Reena's father? Yes, 1,000,000%. I have all sorts of questions about the record being expunged, what led up to that, all that period of time that Reena was away. Like, all of that still is very interesting to me, but him not being able to, go and identify the body has nothing to do with it. Like, to me, this just speaks to the idea that he is a pretty emotionally fraught individual.
Yes.
From what we can tell. Like, it seems like he does... he does really care about Reena. He does want to try to find some sort of way to bridge the gap, to the point where he's just like offering, pizza or French fries or whatever it was he offers. So when,
basically anything she wants.
Yeah, he's trying to just give in to all of her demands for if she has her friends over for dinner. And it feels like this is somebody who's really trying. Is he trying to overcompensate for something that happened that we don't know about? Sure.
Yeah.
Is it possible that Reena's mom has been a little bit more rigid, and he's trying to play the opposite side of that? I mean, any of this is still possible.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's trying to bridge the gap, like you said. That's like, okay, listen, the mom is like, you can't hang out with these girls. Reena's like, I'm going to do it anyways. And the dad's like, let's compromise. Let's have some pizza and fries. You bring your friends over. Then at least we can know who they are, and we know who you're hanging out with. So it gives them a little bit of peace. It gives Reena a little bit of freedom. They can sort of figure it out. Because so far, the things that Reena is doing, when they took her door, I was like, Because she's listening to some music and sneaking out and, smoking. She's a teenager. Like, what are you expecting to be happening here?
Yeah. It just feels like, what?
They're trying to find themselves. Listen, being a teenager sucks, and it sucks to suck.
Yes.
And it's a really tough time in life. I think we all, as adults, kind of forget how bad it is to be a teenager, where a lot of your firsts are happening, your first love, your first heartbreak, the first time your best friend lies to you. Like, it's just, you don't know what's going on. All these new things are coming in. You're trying to figure out who you are. It's a really sucky time.
Yeah, and I think it's even worse for somebody like Reena because feels so different than everybody else her age. Like, she has a very different religious background. She has a very different cultural background. She stands out a lot. She's, getting made fun of at times for things that she can't do anything about. And she is just so desperate to feel like she's a part of something. And I think that's really the inherent tragedy of all of this. Like, regardless of how Reena dies on the show, like, she was only at this place in the first place because she just felt like this was a chance for her to finally get in with these people who she really cared about, even though they had made it abundantly clear that they didn't care about her.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a tragic story of a girl who just wants to have friends, and she's trying to make friends, and this has happened to her with the people that she just wanted to be friends with. I'm not saying, like, what she did wasn't really crappy, calling up and doing all these things and saying all these things about Josephine.
Yeah.
That stuff can really hurt you as a teenager as well.
Of
It
course.
can really destroy you while you're going through high school, but nothing is worth, murder.
Yeah,
Nothing.
that's just the thing. And this show, I think it really portrays these characters accurately. I'm usually not super game for shows that are this dark, if I'm being honest. Like, I usually like to keep it light. I usually like to make fun of a couple characters on the shows that I watch, but I just think it's been played so well through these first 3 episodes. It's really immersive. It is dark, it is heavy, but I'm very excited to see where things go from here.
Yeah.
If you guys did miss it, though, click that box right there and you can watch our review of the first 2 episodes of Under the Bridge. Also, join our Patreon. Live streams every week. We'll talk all about Under the Bridge. Thank you to our patrons for your support. We really appreciate that, and we'll see you here next time.